Jean Piaget was a well-known psychologist who was most prominently known for his child and adolescent development. He was born in Switzerland in 1896 and died in 1980. He is one of the foremost cognitive psychologists with his theories in child and adolescent development. He was influential in bringing developmental theory into mainstream schools through his work with working in an IQ lab trying to identify student IQ levels. While working in this lab in France, he created the idea that children have certain stages where they are developing at certain points. He felt that the IQ system was flawed, and his original goal was to create a different method of identifying the lower students in order to better serve their educational needs. He was originally a biologist, which made him more interested, in addition to the brain, it made him interested in his surroundings and human surroundings and how they adapted to their environment. He was trying to bring theories together to incorporate a human's intelligence and the surroundings around them. Cognitive development theories were based in Piaget's idea that what makes us different from animals is our ability to see abstract symbolic reasoning. As humans, we are able to create an abstract around a certain idea or concept, which allows us to do more than an animal might. Cognitive development theories look at humans to create schemas. Schemas are the way in which we see the world. It is our perception of a situation or a person or an idea, and it's really created on an individual basis. There are lots of things that can affect our schemas based on our culture, where we grew up, gender, race, etc. So it's all based on how we have been able to adapt to our environments, and everybody's schema is personal to themselves. Humans use two different methods to adapt into ideas into their schemas. They can do it through accommodation, excuse the typo there, through accommodation, where humans take their idea or a new concept and they change their schema to fit that idea. Or through assimilation, which allows for humans to fit a new idea or a new concept into their schema. So with accommodation, they're changing their outlook on the world in order to accommodate the new idea. This happens a lot when you get into the older ages and you get into high school, college, and you're starting to learn new things about the world. You might meet somebody that changes your mind on the way a certain culture behaves or the way a certain religion behaves. Assimilation is just where we learn new things, like a math problem or a math strategy. In order to solve this problem, we're able to fit that into our schema and find a way for it to belong in our world. So there are four main stages to cognitive development as far as Piaget is concerned. His first one is a sensory motor stage, which basically lasts from birth and through infancy. Here is where children are learning things like object permanence, where if an object exists, it always exists, whether or not you can see it. Many children, especially in that infancy age, if you take something and hide it from them, they'll often forget that it exists until they reach that kind of older infancy age where even if you take the ball and hide it from them, they're going to recognize that it was still there and it is still an object in the world. So Piaget imagined that our intelligence is measured by our memory, as well as how we begin to develop language and motor skills. And that's really where the sensory motor stage is concerned, is looking at how a child plays, essentially. The pre-operational stage lasts through early childhood to about 6 or 7. And this is where you see children become obsessed with themselves. Their thinking is all about them, and their language is all about them, to the point where they might narrate what they're doing, even though somebody is watching them and knows exactly what they're doing anyway. Their body becomes a little less awkward. They're able to move and play, and they're able to kind of increase that memory, motor skill, language skill, and become a little human. Concrete operational is really elementary through early adolescence. It usually runs until about 11 or 12. And this is where intelligence becomes more logical, more systematic. They're able to problem solve a little bit better. They're able to wrap their minds around abstract concepts a little bit better. And they start to develop more and more logical thinking. And then the final stage is formal operational, and this is what is that final stage where adolescence and adulthood and intelligence becomes focused more on being able to use symbols, whether those are words or other ideas, to define an abstract concept. We as educators talk about strategies and methods all the time. That is a way of looking at an abstract idea to put it into practice. So with that comes language development. Piaget's cognitive developmental theories with his 4 stages really focused additionally not just on what our brains were doing and what our bodies were able to do, and not just memory, but also specifically language. So in those 4 stages, he can break it down through age groups and kind of the expected ability of what children should be able to do at a certain age. However, most child psychologists in the field today still very much recognize that children mature at varying stages and varying exceptionalities. And so if a child is not matured to a certain point within that sensory motor by the age of 2, that does not necessarily mean that they won't get there, but children have multiple things that they are faced with. So it's still a bit flawed, and there's lots of criticisms on Piaget's thought process, just being that it's a little outdated. And while child psychologists now realize that there's other factors to consider instead of just age, so things like home life and parents and time and resources and all of those things that we know can be issues. So specifically looking at each of the stages in language development as far as Piaget was concerned, you have the sensory motor stage, which usually lasts until about that 2 years of age. Here language is really early, and it usually is where you hear children start to imitate the adults around them. They start to babble, they start to just learn the way their mouth works and the way sound works. In addition to that, they're able to start to kind of learn symbols for words. They start to recognize what an object is, connecting that to a word. So the simple things like bottle and mom and dad and all of those first word type things where they learn, if I say bottle, I will get food. You have the pre-operational stage, and this usually lasts until about the age of 6 or 7. So it's very, very early elementary. Kids tend to talk a lot and all the time, and this is where they're learning to express themselves through language. They finally have the words to be able to say what they want, and so they just kind of go on and on and on and on. And usually they go on and on and on about themselves. They don't really understand that other people have perspectives or might have a different way of thinking at or looking at a situation. Concrete operational stage usually lasts again about until 11 or 12. And the language begins to mature and children are able to begin to understand logic and problem solving. This is also where you see in the ages between 7 and 12 a lot of that imagination beginning to expand, and they're able to start including not just the facts of the story, but they're able to start kind of putting in that abstract thought. So it's not just that they went to the store. They went to the huge store with all of the colorful items, and they were able to pick out one special toy. So they're able to kind of imagine further than just what's in front of them. And then the formal operational stage. This lasts through adulthood. And language is used in multiple forms and can be used to express all ideas, whether it's logical or abstract. You get into the idea of academic language here, because as we get into high school, so that adolescence and college, we all kind of learn a certain academic language that hopefully lasts throughout a lifetime. Technical language for certain jobs, and then also anything that requires any kind of political thinking and everything else that is expected to come with adulthood. So the formal operational stage is where language can be used across all grounds and to express all sorts of ideas. I hope this helped you understand a little bit more about who Jean Piaget was and about cognitive and language development.